So thank you, Dr. Prashant, for organizing this wonderful event for invasive procedures. As radiologists should come up and more start doing these procedures. So we will be talking about the fetal interventions, mainly the amniocentesis, CVS, and fetal reduction. Of course, there are other indications like in TTTS management, skin biopsies. There are some therapies which are available like neural tube defect repair, critical aortic stenosis repair. In India, we are not really doing it very often. But then the next lecture by Dr. Bavaran will tell us about the other therapeutic procedures also. So they're diagnostic and therapeutic. So we will right now concentrate on the diagnostic ones. Before you start your own invasive obstetric setup, you should know all these things. So PNDT formalities are done already. The consent, the pre-procedure checklist, and pre-procedure screening ultrasound. So this is just actually how we explain it to the patient. This is in the layman's language. What is amniocentesis? Because pre-procedure counseling is very important. The requirements, as Dr. Prashant has said, that referring doctors request letter, all ultrasound and blood reports. They should carry the ultrasound reports and the blood reports. The reports pertaining to previous child, if any, because sometimes if it is a single gene disorder and some DNA mutation, something like that, we need to submit it to the lab and we should keep the copy of that. So they should carry all these reports with them. Usually the amniocentesis is done around 17 weeks. According to guidelines, of course, beyond 15 weeks also is possible. Procedure to be done on empty stomach. It is not mandatory that starvation is needed, but sometimes patients are apprehensive, and if they are eaten a lot of things, and sometimes they have that pukish feeling, especially if it is in the first 3 months like in CVS. So we tell them, you preferably have a light breakfast, you can drink water in between, but come 2 hours, don't eat 2 hours before the procedure. It's not that we need empty stomach or starvation for the procedure, and it is done under ultrasound guidance. That is what we always explain it to the patient. We tell them how it is done, like how you insert a needle. The needle is just like any other blood collection needle, so they should know what kind of a thing you are doing. Post procedure, we tell the patients to go back to the referring physician for a checkup, stay for observation of the hospital for a few hours if the referring doctor feels the need to do so. Antibiotics and tocolitis, as per the referring physician's advice. For amniocentesis, they're not recommended. For CVS, for fetal reduction, they are recommended. We will see it as and when we are doing the procedures. The complications are, of course, explained to the patient. The complication rate is anywhere between 0.1 to 0.3%. So that is 1 in 3 in, say, around 1,000 procedures. The complications can be spotting, abdominal pain, leaking of liquor, and rarely the injury to the fetus and abortion, which is a very rare complication. And we tell them to report to the referring physician in case of any pain, bleeding, or these symptoms. We should also tell them about the reports. When are you expected to get the reports? So the typical karyotype requires 3 weeks, and FISH report comes early. Microarray takes around, say, 2 weeks. So all these things should be told to the patient. If the patient has come to you for a pre-procedure counseling before doing the procedure, sometimes if the patients are staying far off, the appointments are given on the phone and the patient comes directly to you on the day of procedure, especially for amniocentesis. So then you can't help it, but otherwise you can give this a proper instructions to the patients at the appointment, the requirements for the procedure and possibilities of any complications and about the reports. So this is on your letterhead. You can just tell them about the pre-procedure instructions. You should scan the fetus thoroughly when the patient comes to you for the procedure. You should look for the soft markers for the growth of the fetus, presence of any hematoma, fibroids, because you need to avoid them. If there is a lot of hematoma, maybe you need to postpone the procedure for a week. If the patient is having any active bleeding, you have to explain the procedure to the patient before doing it. And you should understand the indication. You should understand how to interpret the dual marker report. If there is any single gene disorder or any thalassemia is the indication, so then there should be parents report available. If there is a previous child with thalassemia, then any mutation known, that should be known to you. means the report should be available. So you should spend some time before doing the procedure with the patient. The material requirement for performing the amniocentesis is the, of course, sterile gauze and antiseptic solution, sterile sheets to cover the patient, sterile ultrasound probe cover, sterile gel. We don't have it available so often, so we just use the betadine as a coupling agent as the ultrasound gel, 20 or 21 number needle, two 20 ml syringes, and the tubes for collection of the sample, which is sterile and which are without any additives for the amniocentesis or amniotic fluid. You have to do the transverse sweep of the maternal abdomen in a sagittal view. The ultrasound probe must be placed in a transverse plane to the maternal abdomen. This is easier for performing the procedure, always perpendicular to the maternal skin. That is really important. Then you get the exact judgment for the needle placement, and taking care it does not inadvertently slide. If the patient is multipara, if the patient is obese, sometimes the because of the maternal contour or the abdominal contour, it tends to slide over the abdomen, and you should hold your probe very firmly. You should see the entire needle going in, so you should maintain the appropriate angle. You should put the needle without hesitation. I mean, there should not be any tenting, and this is how, in fact, if it buckles like this, you will then may not be able to puncture it, and there will be a chorioamniotic separation. And that's why it is always better to do the procedures beyond 16 weeks, because 16 weeks is the time when the amnion completely fuses with the chorion. So it is always safer beyond 16 weeks. And then again, after the amniocentesis, you have to write down what you've done the procedure. Always keep a habit of writing a blood group, so that when you're mentioning it in the report, you will always look for it in the patient's file, because if there is Rh negative blood group, then the anti-D injection is given within, say, 24 hours post procedure. And of course, the complications and the reports and all these things are to be given in a written format after the procedure to the patient. Now, there are the guidelines. Everyone who wants to do these invasive procedures should go through these. The guidelines for the invasive procedures for the prenatal diagnosis. So this is a very good article which was published in around 2016. Of course, it talks about all the checklists. We've seen that before, but the common question is about the Rh status. So these guidelines say that you should check the Rh status before the procedure, and prophylactic anti-D immunoglobulin should be given to non-sensitized women within 72 hours, they've said, but most of the gynecologists prefer to give it within 24 hours post-procedure. Universal maternal screening for blood-borne viruses like hepatitis or HIV is not recommended at this stage. Since we are putting in the needle, there is always a question in the mind that should we check all these things for a mother, but then these are not really recommended at this stage. Antibiotic prophylaxis before an invasive procedure again is currently not recommended. We don't advise anything before amniocentesis, but before CVS, fetal reduction, cord blood sampling, etc., the antibiotic prophylaxis is preferred. The main principles of asepsis need to be observed while performing an invasive procedure, and that itself is sufficient. A detailed report regarding the procedure must be provided to the managing healthcare provider. So that report should be, the post-procedure instructions in the report should be there. The amniocentesis is, of course, they say that 15 weeks plus it should be done, but our suggestion is usually 16 to 17 weeks. 16 weeks for sure if the patient has come to you for a pre-procedure counseling. If the patient is taking appointment on the phone, and then if you just calculate it by her LMP and then call her at around 16 weeks, sometimes it may happen that the growth is 4 to 5 days less, and you'll end up doing it, see the patient at around 15 weeks to 3 days, and then if you're not very comfortable doing the procedure, you will have to send the patient back again and call after 1 week. So we usually prefer to call the patient, say around 17 weeks, 16 weeks, 4 days, so that at least the patient is beyond 16 weeks. And even if the growth is 2-3 days ahead, it is not beyond 18 weeks anytime. So the report also comes in time. A 20 or 21 number spinal needle is used. A 9 centimeter standard LP puncture needle is used, but you should always have a 15 centimeter long spinal needle in clinic ready. Sometimes the patient may be obese, the fetus may be little lower down, especially this is in case of CVS and fetal reduction, when the size of the uterus is just at around 12 weeks, and then sometimes you need to use a longer needle. So if you have not scanned the patient before and the patient is come to you directly on the day of appointment, and if you realize that the patient is obese and the depth is too much, then you can't really run around to get that 15 number needle, which is 15 centimeter needle, which is not very easily available. Needle entry through the placental cord insertion must be avoided, and if technically feasible, avoidance of the placenta is preferable, especially in the Rh negative women. The frequency of maternal cell contamination increases with the presence of blood-stained amniotic fluid and when the operator is less experienced. To minimize this maternal contamination, first 2 ml of the fluid should always be discarded. You should have one 2 ml, 5 ml syringe also ready. Just aspirate 1 or 2 ml and should be discarded, and then attach the 20 cc syringe and start aspirating the fluid. You should always aspirate under guidance. You are holding the probe with one hand and the needle with the other hand. So you should train the assistant to aspirate the fluid, detach the needle, and then attach the syringe and aspirate the fluid. Always look for the presence of fibroids. You have to avoid the fibroids going through the fibroids. So always scan it properly. Why it is very important to scan the fetus before procedure? If you find any anomalies, there is a separate counseling needed. Parents may not want to then do the procedure. They may just want to discontinue the pregnancy if you find something, some gross abnormalities, something like a heart defect or something like a CNS defect. So you should always scan them properly. Now this was a patient who had come for an amniocentesis. It was actually 17 weeks, but if you see, the placenta is anterior and almost entirely covering your approach is going to be very difficult. And then while scanning, you realize that somewhere, maybe lower down, in fact, you get some clear pocket. Sometimes when it is too much lower down, just above the pubic bone, putting in the needle, you have to angulate the needle, angulate the probe, and sometimes you may not be really very good at putting these needles. But then whenever there is no other choice, you have to then put in the needle sometimes, really at a lower level. As you can see here, it is really going to be a difficult procedure. But then finally we managed to get some small window. You have to be really very careful when you're putting in the needle. It should not really hit the other side. And the operator also should be very careful, not moving the needle at all. And there is not much window for you to sort of aspirate here. And of course, as I said, you must see the entire needle and the tip, especially that it is in the amniotic cavity, and you should document it. You should always document that it was in the amniotic fluid where there was no fetal part. And post procedure, you have to document the heartbeats, call the relative inside, show that the heartbeats are there, and tell the patient also that these are the heartbeats of the patient. And then, as I said, why you should scan the patients thoroughly and understand the reports. This patient came for the amniocentesis. By dating, she was 18 weeks, 4 days. And if you see, all the parameters were small. It was around 16 weeks, 15 weeks. Of course, early onset growth restriction can be one of the indication for the chromosomal aneuploidy. She had a dual marker, which was high risk for the Downs. But then if you see, the smallness was because of the insufficiency, uteroplacental insufficiency. She has absent forward diastolic flow just at around 17 weeks. And if you see her dual report, it was the very low PAPA which actually was causing that abnormal dual marker report. So ideally speaking, this patient should have been put on aspirin just at 12 weeks, but she had not been put on aspirin. When the report for the Down syndrome came as high risk, she changed the doctor because she was told to do the amniocentesis. Then the other doctor saw her at around 15, 16 weeks and then again told her to do the amniocentesis. Meanwhile, that window was lost to put her on actually the aspirin and this treatment. We did the amniocentesis, but of course this report was normal. and again she had little less liquor, and the main problem actually was the uteroplacental insufficiency, which would have been a very severe problem because at 17 weeks she had absent forward diastolic flow. This was a patient, 42-year-old IVF, and the risk was 1 in 5 on dual marker. Of course, a high risk. She also had absent nasal bone. She had bleeding PV at 12 weeks, so she didn't want to opt for a CVS. And then when she came for amniocentesis, there was, of course, absent nasal bone. She had posterior fossa abnormality and she had a VSD. The fetus had a VSD. So this patient then decided not to continue with this pregnancy because of the other problems which were detected. So the amniocentesis was not done. So that's why you should scan the fetus thoroughly before doing the procedures. And of course, you can then tell the patient to do not just a karyotype. If they are willing to continue the pregnancy, they should go for a microarray, and you should convert that to the microarray test and not just the facial karyotype. So that's why you have to scan the fetus very thoroughly. You have to collect the amniotic fluid in a sterile container. Look at the color. It has to be a clear fluid, light yellowish in color. If it is hemorrhagic, it is dark yellow. If it is blood tinged, it may have, it may take a long time for the culture. Sometimes the yield of cells is a little low. Fish does not require culture. So, of course, a fish report comes in handy. So, if the patient is opted only for karyotype, and if you see that the fluid is hemorrhagic, you should tell the patient and get the fish report at least done. So, if the risk is of Down syndrome is just high in the dual marker, at least you get some answer. Culture failure is sometimes seen in advanced gestational age, not very common, but it happens sometimes if you're doing the procedure for whatever reasons, say at around 24 weeks and things like that. And of course, if there is a hemorrhagic fluid, then the culture failure may be there once in a while. Sample can be stored at room temperature for 24 hours. This is especially for those who don't have, who are practicing in the interiors of places where immediate collection of the sample by the lab is not possible. It can be stored for 24 hours, can be transported, it can be couriered in a transportation tubes. It can sustain pressure when they are transported properly. The labs provide you a good transportation tubes and the equipment. Better to inform the lab in advance if the collection boy is picking up the sample. So same day pickup is always possible. No refrigeration is needed if you're storing it for 24 hours. It can be stored at room temperature. Then of course there are different lab tests, fish, karyotype, microarray. If you're doing the microarray, you need the maternal blood. So that should be remembered. Otherwise the patient will go away and then there will be a recall for that maternal blood collection. Structural abnormalities versus just an abnormal dual or quadruple marker, you should decide about microarray and karyotype. Torch PCR is done if there is a history of, a torch infection in a mother. So the amniotic fluid torch PCR is also possible. The report comes typically in about 7 days' time. And very important thing is to always look at the final report before dispatching it to the patient. So that you should always keep a habit. The report may be coming after 2 weeks and 3 weeks, and sometimes the staff sitting outside will just send it across to the patient, and it is not done. You have to look at the report. In fact, we have the habit of keeping one Xerox and attaching to our form so that we have the records of all the reports which are done with us. So with this, we have seen that you should know the indication. You should evaluate the contraindications for amniocentesis. There are not many contraindications. You should scan the fetus thoroughly. Post-procedure instructions are to be given, and you should look at the reports before the dispatch. So all these things should be remembered for the amniocentesis. Then sometimes, rarely you get the request for amnio infusion in severe oligohydramnios, amnio reduction in severe polyhydramnios. Amnio infusion really is, the request is not really there nowadays. It doesn't have a role even in cases of severe oligohydramnios. But sometimes you do get requests if it is a severe polyhydramnios causing discomfort to the mother, or in a case of TTTS, if it is just say around 29 to 30 weeks, and at one sitting, you can remove as much as 1.5 liters, maximum to 2. and patient may be comfortable for 1 week, sometimes for 2 weeks, and anyway they have to deliver the patient. But sometimes the gynecologist wants to wait till say around 31 to 32 weeks, and then these procedures can be done, which is called an amnio reduction. So rarely you get the request for that. The complications again are not many if you do it beyond 16 weeks. Fetal loss rate typically is, some years back, say in 2011-12, there were references for the loss being around 0.1. The complication rate overall can be set to at about 0.3. It's not the fetal loss rate. Leaking PV, bleeding PV are sometimes observed by the patient. Chorioamnioitis is the one of the rare complication, but you should always, prepare the patient like you prepare before the surgery. So you should, prepare and paint the patient thoroughly and use the surgical reps. Needle injury, of course, when you're doing it under guidance, is very uncommon. Risk factors for the complications can be, when you are doing 3 or more punctures. Rarely you need to do 2 punctures, but if it is more than 2 punctures, then preferably you can, postpone the procedure. You can then do it, say, after 1 week. If there is history of bleeding PV already, if there are fibroids, you're trying to avoid the fibroids. Sometimes the difficult approach it is in cases of Mullerian anomalies. If the patient has previous history of repeated abortions, maybe any kind of insult, you put in a needle and uterus tends to contract, and then sometimes the internal loss opens up and there may be a pregnancy loss, so that can happen. So all these previous histories are important. But if it is more than 3 punctures, then this kind of complication may occur. So if you see this, now look at this, this really has a very kind of very limited space, and you are just putting in the needle. If you are going to hit the placenta, so you are sometimes hesitant, and then if you're hesitant, this is what happens. If you see now, the entire amnion is got sort of wrapped around the fetus, and there has been a chorioamniotic separation. Now you feel that, oh, there is so much of a liquor, but this is not liquor. All that amnion has got separated from the chorion, and in fact this is an extra amniotic cavity, and that's why you're seeing this as a fluid. So now this is a complication which should be avoided, of course, but then in this case we had it, this was around 10 years back. This was in one of the twins, and that's why the position also was a little difficult. We had to be sure that we were taking it from 2 different twins. And then in such patients, you just have to stop the procedure. You have to scan the patient after 1 week. Luckily, in this patient, the amnion fused again, and we could do the procedure. But then again, you will have to, talk to the patient, talk to the concerned referring physician, and then take a decision of a repeat procedure. Excuse me. With that, we come to the CVS. As per the guidelines, they say it should be 10 weeks plus. We prefer to do it beyond 11 weeks because we do it transabdominally. We're not doing it transcervical. 12 weeks is the best time, as the thickness of the placenta is better. And anyway, if it is for a dual marker raised indication, it is going to be 12 weeks by the time the patient comes to you with the report. If it is there for thalassemia, previous child with thalassemia, parents are thalassemia minor trait, then of course parents are aware. If it is some single gene disorder, previous child affected, then that you have to do the procedure well in advance. Then we prefer to scan the patient at around 11 weeks and then give the appointment and call the patient by 12 weeks. Nowadays, because of a good first trimester screening module, we are getting more and more requests for the CVS. We prefer to scan the patients before giving the appointment, unlike amniocentesis. Pre-procedure analysis is the same as to scan the fetus, whatever is possible at 12 weeks. Antibiotic Duvidilon cover is better. You have to stop the blood thinners before doing the procedure. For amniocentesis, nobody is put on these blood thinners, especially the Lomopine and these things, till about 17 weeks. Of course, the aspirin is there and we don't need to stop it before the amniocentesis always. But at 12 weeks, if you're doing a CVS, it should be stopped. Pre-reduction or pre-CVS instructions are to stop the Icosapent and low molecular heparin. We advise antibiotics and Duvidilon, and we tell the patient to refer to go to the referring physician in case they have any other preference for the antibiotics, so that they have also consulted the doctor, and the gynecologist doesn't tell you that these are not the antibiotics which I didn't want to start. Before any procedure, you should scan the fetus thoroughly, look for the markers, you should look for the hematoma, fibroids, explain the procedure to the patient, understand the indication. Again, all these things are the same. We prefer to scan the patient before giving the appointments, because sometimes in a case of very acutely retroverted uterus, till about 12 weeks, the uterus still remains in the pelvis, and then the approach may be really difficult. It may be there are fibroids, and then the approach may be a little difficult. So these are the things which you start the antibiotics, you stop the blood thinners, you start the tocolytics, and the patient comes directly to you on the day of appointment without prior consultation, and then you land up not doing the procedure, and then it really doesn't look good. So we prefer to see the patients before the reduction and before the CVS. Many people, especially if they're getting the patients from far off places, they're not really scanning the patient before. But in a city like Bombay, it is easier, and we can scan the patients before. Transcervical we don't do. It is the transabdominal approach which is preferred. 18 or 20 number spinal needle is used. We use a 20 number needle for all our procedures. With 18 number, you will get a better yield, but then again, we prefer the 20 number to be on the safer side. The needle is heparinized before doing the procedure. Culture tube is provided by the lab, so that should be ready. Culture tubes are stored in the fridge. Local anesthesia is not needed. Once the needle reaches the placenta, 2 to 10 back and forth movements with a maintained vacuum are done. So sample aspirated in the syringe, filled with the sterile saline with heparin, and then transferred to the culture medium. There has to be enough villi, at least 8 to 10 villi. That is what they say in the guidelines. That is the 5 milligram is the weight approximately. These are free-floating wide structures. They're thread-like and filiform branches they have. Contaminating residual tissue can have similar appearance, but they're more amorphous. They don't have that distinct branching pattern. So you can then differentiate it with experience. Sample is always mixed with blood because it is in the placenta. So you have to transfer it to the medium, dilute it with heparinized saline sometimes to check for the villi. You have to, sort of see it under the wing, in front of a wing box or under the light, so that those villi can be seen better. These villi, if the fluid is much blood tinged, are sometimes difficult to see, so you can dilute it with the heparinized saline. 12 to 13 weeks dual marker, understanding of the report, requesting for early confirmatory test. There is a lot of anxiety waiting till 17 weeks if you postpone it to, say, the amniocentesis, and that's why we are getting more and more requests for that. So this is how you should do those back and forth movements, something like this, and then aspirate. This is different position of placenta, and then you have to see how will you scan the patient. It is in this position of placenta, it is easier. But imagine if the placenta was completely anterior like this, and then if you're putting the needle from here or from this approach, and then you get a very small space, and then there are chances that you may penetrate through the chorion and amnion, which is not advisable, because then that will have those amniotic band syndrome consequences. This placenta, of course, was thick. We could approach it from anywhere. This was a triploidy patient, in fact. Look at the size of the fetus and look at the size of a placenta. So this was easier, but then sometimes, the placenta can be really a thin placenta, and then, putting in the needle may be a little difficult. So you have to then scan the patient. You can't always keep your probe in a transverse position. The probe may be in any oblique, longitude, in any position. Wherever you get a good length of placenta like this, that is more important while doing a CVS. So you have to position your probe accordingly and see that the placenta is in that sort of a longitudinal section, or you get a good kind of a length where you can do these penetrating movements. Then you can't put the needle like this, because then you will have a very short distance to do that jabbing movement. So that has to be remembered. So CVS is sometimes a little tricky in an inexperienced hands. Again, the lab test may be safe, but here we have more and more indications for thalassemia, for hemoglobinopathies, for inborn errors of metabolism, the previous child especially who is affected with these, the DNA test, the muscular dystrophy especially. You should remember the reports typically take 4 to 6 weeks, and that's why it is important to do a CVS. Storing and transportation is the same as amniotic fluid. Culture medium has expiry date, so that should be remembered. Sometimes you have culture medium in your clinic, and then you get a request for CVS and you say yes, yes, the culture medium is there in the fridge, but you should look at the expiry date and then tell the lab to send you a fresh sample. Technically, is it more difficult? Is it more risky? No, it's a myth. It is not. Fetal loss rate again typically is the same. Vaginal bleeding, leaking, in fact, is rare at this time. Chorioamnitis risk is in fact also very less as compared to the amniocentesis. Association with later onset of preeclampsia is not proved. Patients a lot of times read on the internet and then they come asking you for the side effects. And this was some years back. It was thought that there was an association with late onset preeclampsia because you are, sort of hindering with that chorion frondosum or with the placenta, but then it is not proved and it does not hold true. Recently, in fact, in 2019, there was an interesting article. Everyone should read that. The risk of miscarriage following amniocentesis or chorionic villi sampling, and there was a systematic review. And in fact, they came up with the controversial statement that the with CVS, in fact, the complication rate was lower than the amniocentesis. And then they have given the explanations also for that, thinking probably amniocentesis is done by a novice also, and CVS, in fact, is done by more expertise is needed, and that's why people who are expert in that field are doing it. In amniotic cavity, when you're putting in the needle, it is a sort of open space. When you put in the needle in the placental tissue, it is a closed space, and that's why the chances of infection are less. And they've given some, kind of different explanations for that. It is worth reading this article. You must read that. The invasive procedures in the twins, you have to be a little careful. DCDA twins, both the sacs should be sampled, MCDA single sample. You should localize the placenta and the membrane. If confident, clear demarcation, then aspirate from one sac and then from the other. Injecting a dye, indigo carmine, use of methylene blue is abundant because of higher risk of abnormalities which are detected, especially the bowel atrasias. Two needles inserted, same needle advanced through the membrane. All these things are not done. It is better to put two needles separately. So this is how they've said that you can inject some dye, and then when you are aspirating from the other sac, if you don't get that colored fluid, then you know that you have aspirated from a different sac. But we prefer to do the amniocentesis, say definitely beyond 17 weeks, and when we are confident about two separate sacs and more localization of the separateness. CVS is little more difficult because cross contamination is more likely at that 12 weeks. So if it is can be avoided and can be done at 17 weeks, it is easier to differentiate between two feti. And in case of abnormal report, reduction at a later stage is more difficult, and that's why sometimes the CVS may be indicated. So again, there are pros and cons for both the things. So look at the placenta, cord insertion site of the placenta, orientation of the fetus membranes, and then differentiate between the two and then do it. With that, we come to the last part, which is a fetal reduction procedures. This increasing the ART facilities nowadays. So there is the incidence of triplets is increasing. Nowadays, of course, there is a restriction on number of embryos to be transferred. Gone are the days when we used to see 4, 5, 6 feti also in fact growing. So now in fact they have, as per the guidelines for the ART, they've said you should not be transferring more than 3 embryos at a time. So higher order multiplicity is in fact not very commonly seen. With higher order or with triplets and higher order, there are chances of maternal morbidity, mortality, and things like that. And that's why the fetal reduction is advisable. it is very important to do a good reduction. Patients are worried what is going to happen to that fetus. Sometimes they feel that it is going to be an abortion kind of a process, that fetus is going to come out. So you have to really spend time with the parents before doing the procedure. You have to take a very good informed consent. You have to do a retail ultrasound. If the patient has come to you directly at 12 weeks, if it is not an IVF pregnancy, you should trace the previous reports. You should see the image preferably to see that two separate sacs or three separate sacs were seen or not. The chorionicity is very important to differentiate. You should localize the placenta. You should look at the fetal abnormalities, especially the smaller size, especially the NT, the TV, the nasal bone. So all these things should be scanned for. Relation to the cervix to be seen. The approach is transabdominal. Fetus in the lower sac is not reduced because it is nearer the cervix, and of course the chances of miscarriage would be more, and of course it is technically more difficult. In cases of dichorionic triamniotic pregnancies, the MCTA twin pair should be reduced. Then this triplet pregnancy has to be reduced to a singleton pregnancy. Then you cannot really keep the MCTA twins because they may then develop the complications of MCTA, and then the parents will end up losing all three eventually. So in these cases, it has to be done. The twins are to be stopped. Twins are reduced, and a single pregnancy is continued. It is typically done between 10 to 14 weeks. Delay beyond 12 weeks is unnecessary. Post-procedure, pre-procedure medication is important. Stop blood thinners. Most of these IVF patients are on blood thinners. So that has to be stopped 7 days prior to the procedure. If there are 4 feti, you can reduce it to twins in one sitting. Higher order, you should analyze and then take decision of doing it in 2 sittings. We have done reduction of pentaplets to twins. We have done 3 in one sitting. We have not done more in one sitting. But now, as I said, we don't even get quadruplets, pentaplets very often, as most of the gynecologists are following these guidelines of transferring only 3 embryos. So we don't get that. Very rarely we get the request for reducing even the twins to a singleton pregnancy. Sometimes triplets are to be reduced to a singleton pregnancy. This is especially there, in cases of previous history of miscarriages, previous history of cervical incompetence, that may be a unicornuate uterus, and then the gynec is worried that even the twins may not go on till say 34 to 36 weeks, and then that's why they want it to be reduced. Sometimes while doing anti-scan, you realize that one twin is abnormal. It may be any kind of an abnormality, and then it is a life-threatening one, so you have to reduce that fetus. So then these twins can be reduced to a singleton pregnancy. Again, the instructions are the same like CVS, but here you have to take a separate. Of course, there are consents for a procedure, and the Form G and all those other forms are to be maintained. But we always take the consent for embryo reduction separately. We tell the patients that not all anomalies can be detected at this stage. It may happen that you will reduce one fetus, and then at 18, 19 weeks, they realize that there is a heart problem in one fetus, which are actually now alive. The twins which are alive, one has, say, a cleft lip palate, or one has, say, a club foot, and then they will say that the healthier fetus was reduced, and now we land up with the abnormal fetus, and now what do we do? So we tell the patients that this is the risk which you have to take. Not all abnormalities can be detected at that 12 weeks. We literally scan all 3 feti like we scan for the NT scan and try and see all, but then again, not abnormalities can be picked up. You have to select the embryo. If all 3 are normal, then the nearest to the fundus is selected because that is the easier approach. A 20G spinal needle, longer needle sometimes, as I said, if it is deep in pelvis or if the mother is obese. Many a times these IVF patients are obese and have a very bad thick maternal abdominal wall. So you have to be prepared and have that 15 centimeter needle ready. 15 centimeter needle has got its own kind of, operator kind of difficulties. It tends to wobble a little bit because even if the 10 centimeter goes inside, the 5 centimeter remains outside. and then seeing the entire path of a needle sometimes may be a little difficult, but rarely you need to use it, so you have to be prepared for that. The needle is heparinized. KCl, diluted is not really indicated. Undiluted is, in fact, most of the times we only use undiluted KCl. We take that in a 5 ml syringe, take around 3 cc's in the syringe. LA, local anesthesia is not necessary. You should target the fetal thorax. And then, of course, once you target the fetal thorax and see, you should always, before you inject the fluid, you should always look at the tip. The tip has to be inside the fetus, and that is very important. So needle localization, the tip is very important, and that has to be remembered. Sometimes, rarely, initially, when you are not really used to it, the patient is obese, and you're not very confident, the fetus moves with the needle, so you know that yes, it is there inside. But if you're not seeing the tip, sometimes it is wiser to inject heparinized saline, say half a cc, and see that it is not coming out in the amniotic cavity. I mean, if you inject KCl suddenly 1 ml and you see everything is coming out, it was not in the fetus, and then you are worried. Nothing happens if little bit of KCl gets comes in the amniotic fluid. It really doesn't harm the other one. Transmembranous transfer doesn't occur so much that the other fetus gets affected, but rarely it can happen that if you're not very confident of the tip, you can, before injecting the KCl, you can may just put in a heparinized half cc saline and then see that it is inside, and then inject it. In fact, then you can see the effusion or the ascites coming up in the fetus, and then you know that you are inside the fetus, and then you inject the KCl. You should wait for the cessation of the cardiac activity completely. Keep the needle inside for 1 minute after the cessation, and then withdraw the needle, because sometimes in a very low bradycardia in the heart may get revived again. So always wait. You mark the time on that ultrasound machine that yes, this was the time when you injected. The heart stopped. Usually it stops immediately, say in about 5 to 10 seconds, and then wait for 1 minute at least, the needle in place, and then withdraw the needle. And then again, post procedure, give a detailed report, what you've done, that you write that all were scanned and all were normal, and hence the fetus A or whosoever was selected for reduction. Or if it is the abnormal one, then that one was selected for the reduction. As you can see here, fetus A and B appear concordant, and fetus C was smaller, hence chosen for reduction. And then 2 or 1 cc of KCl, whatever was injected. And then you have to document the cardiac activity of the other 2 feti and write that the FHR of the other 2 were like this, documented, blood group of was confirmed, and then the advice whatever is given. And of course that we have been explained it to the fetus that the residual fetus abnormalities, the developing ones, cannot be ruled out, cannot be evaluated completely at this stage, and all these things have to be explained to the patient. And as you can see now, this was a fetus who had the septated increased nuchal translucency. So obviously now you have to reduce this fetus and not the other 2. So that has to be remembered. Now that may be the one which is nearer the cervix, but then you will have to reduce that. This was, of course, a quadruplet pregnancy. As you can see the 2 there, and you can see 2 in a same sac. So look at these 2 and look at these 2. There were 2 here in one sac, and there were 2 separate. Now this is, of course, at 9 weeks when she had come for a counseling. This was around between 9 to 10 weeks. Now these were nearer the cervix, and in fact the approach looked little difficult. Of course, when you do it at 12 weeks, it will have moved up, and then it may be easier. But then these are the tricky situations. If you're not very confident, you can sort of defer the procedure or send it to somebody who is more expert than you. If you notice anything else, there is a gross hematoma here, and this is where it is going to be there. This was a TVS image, so then this was the hematoma which was there. So again, you have to be very careful. So these are the tricky situations. So we always prefer to scan the patients before giving the appointment for reduction. This was a triplet pregnancy. Again, at around 10 to 11 weeks, she came for the appointment, and now there was a tricuspid regurgitation. This was at 11 weeks. Typically, they come at 11 weeks so that we stop the heparin and the blood thinners, and then do the procedure by 12 weeks. So, as you can see here, there was a tricuspid regurgitation in one of them. So then you know that you have to reduce this fetus. So it is always mandatory to scan all of them. Now this typically was the one which was in the middle. So then again you have to see whether it is going to be technically difficult or not, and how you are going to proceed with that. So with fetal reduction, as I said, the dilute KCl, the heart may remain in bradycardia for longer time. So it is better to use the undiluted KCl. After cessation of cardiac activity, wait for 2 minutes, at least for 1 minute, as I've said before. For each embryo to be reduced, use separate needle. It's preferable. Sometimes there may be little blood inside and things like that. Complications again can be fetal loss, bleeding, infection. All these complications can occur. The patients are admitted by a referring gynec for a day. If they are the nearby hospitals, we prefer to see them once the next day, or we tell the gynecologist to at least scan them the next day before they are discharging the patient. So challenges in all kind of procedures are basically the thick maternal abdominal wall, the flabby abdominal wall, visibility of the needle sometimes can be poor. Some fat is not just operator friendly and ultrasound friendly, and then sometimes the visibility of the needle can be really very tricky. You should always see it in its entire extent, but the tip should be always seen before you do any procedure. So that has to be remembered. You can, sort of make the focus a little bit higher towards the abdomen, so that you see your entry point very well. On our ultrasound machines, the focus is usually at the mid level, because that is where the fetus is going to be. So before doing the procedure, before starting it, you can just sort of make the focus up, so that right from your entry you start seeing the needle path. uh, uh, the needle prick, initially when it pricks, that is the only time when it is going to hurt. So we explain it to the patient that this is the point where you don't do any jerky movement, and once it is inside, once then it doesn't hurt, and once it is in the amniotic cavity, you start seeing the needle very well. It is only the course during the maternal abdomen and the uterine myometrium that is troublesome, and for that, as I said, the focus can be shifted up a little bit, and you should try and see the needle well. Fibroids, the myometrial contractions, these are the ones which are the hindrance always. You can't avoid the fibroids, but sometimes if there are myometrial contractions which are causing a problem, especially this is in CVS, then sometimes giving injection Buscopan helps. Everything relaxes. I mean, the myometrium also relaxes, and then you get a clear indication. If there is a very bad myometrial contraction, especially at 12 weeks, the entire contour of the placenta is gone and it's bad. And then putting in the needle, giving those back and forth movements, getting a good length of the placenta may be a little difficult. So rarely this thing helps. You can wait for some time and then do the procedure. There's no harm. It's better to be safe than sorry. So procedures, you should always plan with appointments, and sometimes can take time. And of course, the ease is with amniocentesis, then CVS, then fetal reduction, and then maybe cord blood sampling. We don't do cord blood sampling in our routine lab or office practice setup, but amniocentesis, CVS, and fetal reductions can be managed if you start doing it and you're doing the other interventions also. So you should, of course, we see 2D, but you should think 3D. Localization of needle tip is very important. You should practice on a simulator initially, especially for the fetal procedures. It is, like any other USG guided procedure. If you are doing ascitic tapping, pleural fluid tapping, biopsies, then you are used to seeing the needle. Biopsies, of course, we tend to put in the needle from the side and see the entire length of a needle, and we are good at it. Of course, for superficial biopsies, we don't use a convex probe, and with linear probe, sometimes the needle positioning is a little different than with the convex probe, and the fetal procedures are done with the convex probe always. So that is a little bit of a difference. For ascitic fluid tapping, for pleural fluid, especially for pleural fluid, we don't really, tend to see that entire length and do it properly because we just aspirate it. But for ascites, for pleural fluid, if there is enough space and a proper thing is possible, you should try and see the entire length of a needle, practice it that way, and then you start seeing you know how you have to maneuver the probe and the needle to see the entire length. And of course, the most important part is pre-procedure counseling, reassuring the patient, telling the patient in their own language, in the layman's language, what you are doing the procedure. Spending time pre-procedure is very important, and the written consent, the written pre-procedure instructions, written post-procedure report is very important, and the documentation has to be very perfect. So that has to be remembered. Even if you're not doing invasive procedures, I think a basic knowledge is very important because it is at your center. If the NT scan is done, if the dual quadruple markers are done, and the report comes as high risk, if the risk is raised, and then the patient is always asking first, that what needs to be done, what is amniocentesis, the patient has developed a rapport with you. So whatever, the patient may come back to you and ask you what is this procedure, and you should know the at least what are the how the procedures are at, how safe they are, the indications, the any contraindications, and the instructions. And of course, a dialogue with the clinician is very important. Of course, there is a lot of hand clue about detecting Down syndrome. 10, 12 years back, this had made a lot of rounds on internet that Gabriella has Down syndrome and Fabio also has a mental delay, that their daughter was born with no mental disability. So everyone deserves happiness, and this family is also beautiful. So it is not that always that Down syndrome is something which is to be dreaded, but of course, nobody wants that Down syndrome child, and that's why most of the times these invasive procedures, what we get the request are for the trisomy 21 risk, and that is how you should probably learn the invasive procedures and the reduction and these procedures also. Thank you.